Hello folks, I hope that you're having a great and safe day today. Today I'm going to take a look at the next chapter of my Living with HD series, where I talk about what it's like to live with Huntington's disease. And today I want to take a look at what it's like to apply for jobs. I was actively job searching until the COVID-19 recession hit. But I've been actively searching for jobs many times during my life. And I'm 7 years into the Huntington's disease. So what is it like to be an active job hunter, a job seeker, and so forth? And what are some of the recommendations I get from others? So that's what I want to talk about today. As a reminder, for those of you who may not be familiar, Huntington's disease is a neurological, degenerative condition that attacks your mind, and your mental facility will drop, your memory will drop, and so forth. It also attacks your physical aspects of yourself. You'll twitch more, you'll shake more, you'll go through these choreas of motion. And then finally, it attacks your mental stability and makes you more likely to be depressed, more likely to, think, and those sorts of things. So one thing, my doctor, who is a neurologist, and she's actually at an HD specialty clinic at Johns Hopkins University here at my local area, she actually recommended that I not apply for another job that wasn't in my field, because one of the issues with Huntington's disease is that it can be harder to learn things that are brand new. I don't think that's the case with me, and I gave her a couple of pushbacks and counterexamples. For example, about 2 or 3 weeks prior to that, I had been invited to play this board game that a lot of my friends like and enjoy. They were all really good at it. It was called Terra Mystica. It's a complex board game with a number of different things in it and so forth. And after playing Terra Mystica, not only did I defeat them, and these are people who've played the game many times, but I dominated them so well. So this idea that I, would have issues picking up a new job with new things, I think isn't the case with me, at least not as much as it might be with other people. And I gave her an example of this board game where I dominated them. And that's not uncommon. I will regularly win a new board game after being introduced to it. I'm very quick at seeing the patterns, seeing the recognition, and figuring out how to put together a strategy that will work long term for the game. So that's one thing. Another thing is that I will also when I'm working and so forth. For me, in addition to board games, I'm still a quick reader at reading books. I also play video games that have new mechanics in them that may not have the same thing, and that sort of thing. So there are other places where I'm being introduced to new things, and I am still keeping up with it. And so I don't think that's impacting me as much. Although, again, that was the sort of critique of my. Luckily, I also told her that I was just looking for either promotion or a side motion in the field proper that I've been working at all of my professional life. And so I got her to write a letter about what it's like to live with HD at a workplace for future job hunting that I may do, or as I may enter a new job. So I can have that ready to say, here's what I can do, here's what I can't do, and those sorts of things. And I have that available. One of the things that I find very interesting when I look at jobs is that there are some jobs out there that require you to have a driver's license in my field. Now my field is higher ed. I work at colleges and universities. Specifically, I work in the residence life section of colleges and universities. I was an RA for 5 years, 3 as an undergrad, 2 as a grad. And then I moved on from there to be a building director at, and I did that for 6 years at Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti. It's a suburb of Michigan, of Detroit, Michigan rather, in Washtenaw County. And I was there for 6 years. I left there to go back to grad school to get another master's degree. My first master's degree was in public administration. I wanted to get another master's degree in philosophy. So I went over to England, and I left my job to go do that for a year. Unfortunately, I had to come back early for financial reasons. And never finished that degree. And then I took up another job at Wayne State University and was there as a building director for 3.5 years. Finished up my run then, went back to grad school a second time. This time I did theology rather than philosophy, which has a slightly different set of assumptions, although still asks the same questions. Went to a seminary for that, got that degree, finished that degree, so I have two master's degrees now. Anyway, I finished that up, went back to college, and to work again. This time I was at Fairfield University as a building director and was there for 2.5 years before I left to move up in the field to an associate director of residential life at Spring Hill College down in Mobile, Alabama. And I had been all over up until then. I'd been in, now in Mobile, Alabama, before on the Gulf Coast. Before that, I had been in Connecticut. I had been in New England for 2.5 years. I'd been in the Midwest for 10. So I'd been all over, and I'd also been in London for as an international student too. So I'd been all over. Unfortunately, about a week after I arrived at Spring Hill College, it was placed on probation by its accrediting agency for financial issues that were happening at this small little college on the Gulf Shore. So my promotion to the Associate Director of Residential Life did not last but a couple of months. I was asked to move back down to a building director position because that was where, and my position was sort of phased out, that I just went there for. So I understand what that's like to so forth. And to think that that's going to be the job I may have until I retire, that sort of thing, I thought that was going to be a great opportunity, a great place for me to go. And unfortunately, it just wasn't to be. So I finished up the year, did my due diligence, help them out, and set them up for success moving forward. And then I took a job that I have now in Catonsville, Maryland, which is right outside of, it's literally adjacent to Baltimore, and it's in Baltimore County proper. And so but I'm at UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and I've been here now for about 2 years and about 7 months, 8 months, actually 9 months now that it's May. So it'll be 3 years in August. So anyway, I've been here now for a while. And I'm now looking for my next job. What I'm doing now is I'm an assistant director of operations, and I do a lot of operations things. It's the first time I've done operations as opposed to residence life. I've gotten to the point where I'm not putting a full 8 hours of work into the job. When I started, I was probably working until like 6 or 7 o'clock at night for the first couple of months as I got adjusted to my new job, which was doing some things I had never done before. It's an operations job, which I'd never done. And then I was putting in 8-hour works for the next couple of weeks, and now, I'm finishing up probably my work in 5 or 6 hours a day. Sometimes not even that. And I've been adding other things, committee memberships. I run a committee for the company on professional development. I've added community works with a few different committees on campus. I've tried to add extra things, and I still don't have, I've gotten to the point where I've done everything I can. I've added additional work from some things that my boss normally did, and I've added additional components to my job, and I'm not doing, much of anything. So anyway, but be that as it may, one of the things I'd like to do moving forward is to move to the next level, and this probably be my last job. Like, this job, I feel like was a temporary job for me for 2.5 years. And after I was let go from my from a previous institution by being dropped down from one level to another, and then I left voluntarily, but that doesn't look good on your resume. And so this was sort of to rebuild my foundation and so forth. And now I'm moving back up, and my goal is to move back up to the job I had before I got dropped back down. I'm not looking for a building director level position. I've already done that. I've been that. I'm out of that. But operations probably isn't the permanent home for me either. So I'm looking for that final fit. So that's where I am and what I'm looking for right now. Now, the way that I've applied for jobs has changed over time. And I'll just give you an example. When I started applying for this field, there was no central clearinghouse of websites for like there is higher ed jobs now. You can, if you're interested in being a professor, if you're interested in working on campus as a staff member, there is there are clearinghouses of websites you can go to where most places, like higher ed jobs is the one that I go to the most, where most universities and colleges, from 2-year colleges through to the best known ones, will post pretty much every job they have, from custodian to professor of arts or something like that, right? So they have all these different sort of things on these central clearinghouses. Well, that didn't exist in the earlier eras of the when I first doing my job searching in 2000 and 2001. So what I did instead, I started going to local institutions that I was willing to work at to see what jobs were posted on their online platform. And this is still in the early days of the internet, right? And so I was doing that, and I had this generic cover letter that I would send out to everybody, and this generic cover letter that I would send out with it, and I would mail them in to the locations that were listed, and I probably mailed 4 or 5 a day while I was job hunting, and would look up every single institution to see if they had jobs posted, and if they did, I would apply for them. And I got interviews for about half the places I applied for. I had a big hit rate for my things, and I didn't have any experience in the field. I'm straight out of grad school. My grad degree, public administration, doesn't apply to this field. This field likes to have people that have higher ed administration degrees, that have student development theory is a degree, and that sort of thing. But I was getting a lot of hits from a lot of places, and after doing phone interviews, and these are some of the first phone interviews I had ever done as a professional now in the field, right? And I'm getting invited to campuses too. I'm probably about 40% of the places I was applying to, I was getting an interview for on the phone, and then about half of the ones that I interviewed for phone invited me to a campus interview too. So I was doing a lot of campus interviews all across around the nation. After about 6 weeks after I started, I got my first offer from Eastern Michigan University, and I accepted it. I was not a polished professional. I had never done anything in the field before, and that sort of thing. But the field had changed. There were more applicants. There was more things. I think you needed to be more professional. And so I have had more difficulty finding jobs as somebody who has experience than I have as a brand new person out of college. I talked about this 6 years later. I'd applied for a job, for jobs after I came back from college at university, from when I was over in London. I was at Middlesex University in North London, and I came back early, like I said, and so I started applying for jobs. It took me a year before I finally was offered a job, and I was applying for like 4 or 5 jobs a day. It was crazy how many jobs I applied for, and again, I had a better cover letter because now I had experience doing this job. I had done this job for 6 years, right? You would think that somebody who has 6 years experience is going to have a better hit rate than somebody who was brand new out of the field. That was not the case at all. I figured I was going to get hired within a month or two after starting to apply. I was hired the first time in 6 months, or in 6 weeks from the first place that made their decision. I found out as I withdrew from other people that I was one of their top candidates too. So the field had changed, and the competition had clearly grown. And anyway, I applied for a number of different jobs around the country and tried to impact change and so forth. And so anyway, I applied for jobs. I eventually was hired at a local job at a place I wanted to relocate to a new place, but the fact that I was a local actually got me the job at Wayne State University, right? When you're nearby, the people who know you can vouch for you. My boss at Eastern Michigan University had also been the boss of the director of housing when they were both at Michigan State, right? So they both knew each other. And when people live together, and this is a small business, right? People will know each other. They can vouch for each other. They can say, yeah, he's a hard worker. He'll be fine. So I wound up at a place that was like just Detroit rather than Ypsilanti. I was still in Michigan. I was still in the area. It's still in the metro area, right? I just went from one place to another, even though I was wanting to relocate. But again, the job is what the job is, right? And so I took the job. I was there. I lived in Detroit for 3.5 years. I'd always growing up in southern West Virginia saying, I want to live in a city someday. I never said to myself, that city should be Detroit. But that's fine. It's all right. But anyway, I moved on from that. I started the job search for other jobs too. And again, I found that there was oftentimes, I'd go through an entire year of applying for jobs I didn't get. I might have only been a hit rate of 10% of the places that I've applied for, maybe of getting an interview, and maybe only 20% of the interviews that I'm doing that I'm getting an invite to campus, and I'm not getting those offers, right? This is happening each time for different jobs that I'm applying for. So this was not easy to do. It took me a while to move up in the field. And it took me multiple places before I did. So now I want to do it again. And again, here's the issue. With somebody with Huntington's disease who's 7 years in, I don't want to spend too much time continuing to work my way up the ladder, right? I don't have that much time to play around with. So I've been more expansive with where I've been applying for, because I want to get in and dial myself back up. So I've been very expansive for about the past 10 months or so. I started job searching last summer. and it's now next summer. And even though I've applied for more than 100 jobs, all of which would be promotions, and I've gotten probably 10 interviews. Again, my hit rate's only about 10%, and no campus invites yet, although the coronavirus thing, most of the places have stopped hiring. They're just circling their wheels and so forth. I actually do have a virtual campus interview with a college over in Illinois coming up next week, so I will be doing something. So who have gone through it, and this is a critical job that they really want to bring somebody in for. But again, there are a lot of those things happening, and I suspect we're going to see a lot more people apply with the coronavirus. There were a lot more applications during the recession from 2008, and so you had a lot more. I mean, you would have jobs that would have hundreds of people apply for them because of the recession. People that were out of work, people who may not have initially wanted to do that as a career, but they were RA for 2 or 3 years, which gave them the experience that they needed to apply, and they're applying. So you had a lot more applications to process for jobs during that time. I suspect we're going to see the same thing after the COVID. Jobs for higher ed institutions are generally seen as pretty stable. My first job was a union job for the United Auto Workers. So they're typically seen as very stable. There were jobs that you can rely on. There's always going to be a demand for higher ed. It may change. An institution may reconfigure itself from working with, may add additional students, may add 2 years programs, or it may have had a major that's just no longer in demand. It may change that major, so you might lose your job if you were a professor of that major. Those things happen. Universities retool themselves, but it's generally seen as a safe place to kind of work. So a lot of people will apply for jobs for higher ed institutions during time, especially since if you're not working, taking out a loan and going back to college is a very reasonable thing. So during the Depression, numbers were actually back up. Higher ed numbers have been dropping across the board. My guess is we'll see the same thing with COVID with stay-at-home programs. That's just my guess. But anyway, but the difficulty of applying for jobs is that, like I've mentioned before, my application for jobs is now much different than it used to be. Now I have specialized cover letters for every job I apply for. I save a copy of the job description. I refer to the job description multiple times. I'll put things that are in there in my cover letter. And I'll mention the institution. I also have a much more organized for a phone interview. For example, when I go into a phone interview now, I've got a printout of the job description, which I've read a few times. I will highlight with different colors of highlight key things in the job description that I want to mention that are in my resume, and then I'll highlight them with the same color in my resume so I can quickly look back and forth between them. So when I look at my resume, I can say, okay, so for example, if it was talking about, one of its key points was that you've done duty, you've been on call, and you had that sort of thing, I can point out to those things in my resume, and this will be in blue, and the ones in my resume will also be in blue too, so that way I'll know which ones apply to each other very quickly, and I'll be able to answer them, because people want a fast answer in an interview setting. They don't want you to take them 2 or 3 minutes to think about your answer before you answer, right? And for somebody who's a little bit slower now because of Huntington's disease, I want to be more prepared for these interviews. And so I am more prepared now than I've ever been. I'm very on on cue and so forth. And it's something, and I'm very engaged with what's happening and what I've done and how it can apply to various experiences. I used to just go into an interview and for the first few jobs I was fine, right? I could interview well, I could hit well. I was doing well with the hit rate backwards for on-campus invites, but now it's much harder. There's a lot more competition. Also, there are fewer jobs as you move up in this field too. At the building director level, you may have Eastern Michigan University, for example, had 8 building directors when I got hired. So you're going to lose 2 or 3 of those a year. You're churning through them, right? But assistant directors, there was only 2 assistants and 1 associate. There was only 3 supervisors for those 8 people that also were doing some additional things, and those people camped their job, right? One of those people had been doing it for decades. Another person had moved up from the previous job, been doing it for a while. And the third one who they hired was also somebody who had moved up from that job. And they all had done it for the rest of their career, right? So those are people those aren't jobs that open up as frequently. And there's fewer of them out there, right? And so forth. And those are the jobs that I've been applying for. So it's naturally harder to get one of those jobs and to get out there. So I understand. and so forth, but I got one. and unfortunately I had to leave. I was asked to step down because of the financial aspects at Spring Hill College. But again, so that's one of the things that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get myself back into that style of a job where you're one of the leaders in the office. And you're putting on those sorts of things. Again, my job that I have right now is operations. I do opening and closing, payments, that sort of thing. I do reports for the office for the financial status of the thing. I do audits, delinquency reports, that sort of thing. So I'm involved in the operation side of things. It's a job. I know that I'll have it throughout the corona, or could probably have it throughout the COVID crisis, even though I'm working from home. But I'm still looking to launch myself up. And those are just some of the challenges that I've had applying for jobs and some of how my career trajectory has changed, some of the tools and tips that I learned. So there you are. I'll leave you to it. Do you have Huntington's disease or something similar? How have you dealt with them? Are these tips or anything here that you want to talk about? I'd love to make this a sort of ongoing platform for conversations with people who have Huntington's disease. And feel free to hit that subscribe button if you like this channel. I try to do a weekly Living with HD for you. And then finally, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day and watching my video. We all have so many things happening in our lives and so many things going on that it can be hard for us sometimes to really dedicate to a video. So for watching it, I really do appreciate that. That's very humbling. Thanks again and have a great day.